I think, very important to me. And I would like to tell you a little bit about, this idea of mentoring first. What's that to be compared against? I'm thinking research first. That's certainly the way I began my career, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as we go along. If you are a graduate student, postdoc, you've probably had some opportunities to mentor others, but if you were an undergraduate who might be listening to this, since it's being recorded, I think you don't think necessarily enough about choosing a research group based on the mentoring process. You probably choose it based on the researcher. And so I just wanted us to be a little more mindful about being a mentor and then choosing a mentor, because hopefully I'll make the case that we all need a mentor. To get started, I should basically say right up front, I am no scholarly expert in mentoring. I've learned, like most of my colleagues, I would say, just by being in the trenches. And I've definitely made my share of mistakes along the way. And so the fortunate thing is, we can course correct and try to get things right, and at least try to move things toward better. And that's kind of, I think something we should all strive for. So I want to begin with the question of, why? Why should mentor come first? Why should we think mentoring before, say, research? And to do that, I don't want to be the sole, this isn't just the Jeff Moore story. I actually want to look at and peer into mentoring another mentoring relationship. And this is a very recent podcast. I listened to it over the weekend. And as I listened to it, all 2 hours, it struck me as there were a lot of lessons to be learned in mentoring. And if we begin with the question of why, it really is the question of what makes research, what makes being a researcher, I should say, so difficult. I want you to listen to this 1.5-minute clip. And right from the very beginning, I want you to listen especially to the journey of research. Don't get bogged down in the science details. I want you to pay attention to Steve Rosenberg, the chief of surgery at NCI, as he describes his journey through the development of immunotherapies for cancer. Let's listen and pay careful attention to these cues about the journey of research.
And that was a very frustrating time. It wasn't until 1984 that we finally figured out a way to use interleukin-2 to mediate regression. We treated over 70 patients with either interleukin-2 or cells that we grew in interleukin-2 and administered to patients without seeing a response until we modified the schedule of interleukin-2 administration, knowing its pharmacokinetics, that is only has a half-life inside the body of about 7 minutes. And so we had to alter the schedule. We had to give higher and higher doses, which mediated toxicity, until finally a patient that we treated in 1984 who had widespread melanoma was administered interleukin-2 and was the first patient, finally, after over 70 other patients, to show us a tumor regression. The first time that a deliberate immunologic maneuver could reproducibly cause cancer regression. It was one of the few eureka moments that I've had in doing research, but the realization finally that after all of those patient deaths, due to everybody had advanced cancer, all would go on to die of their cancer, survived, and that patient is now alive over 35 years later, free of disease.
All right, so it's your turn. Based on what you heard, head over to the Jamboard and complete the sentence with as many responses that you'd like. Put them on these sticky notes. Research brings blank. And I'll be monitoring the Jamboard. We'll give you 11 after 12, so we'll go until 15 after. And I'm curious as to what you heard and picked up about the journey of research and how that was played out in that video clip. So we've got our first response, life. Research brings life, absolutely, to this one individual out of the 71st, presumably, individual, and is still alive today, he noted. And all of the others, and actually in this video, he describes the some what he says, we killed people because we didn't understand what we were doing. So this heightened sense of like what you're doing really does matter, and benefits to society, absolutely. I picked up on a lot of emotion. I picked up on a lot of different emotion. I'm wondering if some of you picked up on that as well. Innovation, absolutely. There was no doubt this was uh, an unproven technology at the time, unproven science. Didn't understand the science. He even said that. Very first word, or one of the very first words he used in the first sentence, frustration. That's where they were prior to getting this first success. Empowerment, absolutely. So uh, there was a feeling of suddenly, they were empowered to be able to do things that they couldn't do before. And as he also went on to explain in this podcast that prior to this first success, they really never knew if it was even possible. It was just a hunch. And it was a hunch where they were like dealing with people's lives. Um, Plenty of challenges, changes, um, finally frustrations that led to solution. Hope, absolutely. That's what that first patient brought, was that this really does work. And we'll take a couple more minutes and see what you came up with. And then, as I have had a lot of time to think about this, I'll tell you what I was thinking, some of which are already on the Jamboard. We'll come back to the Jamboard a little bit later on. Let's move forward. So here's what I came up with. I've got two boxes on the left. They will be very different from the boxes on the right. But in that minute and a half clip, this is what I heard. I heard confusion, failure, distractions, indecision, doubt on the one hand. That was all of the 70 deaths. You just imagine being there, witnessing those deaths. He goes on to talk about it at the end of the podcast. Joy, satisfaction, hope, relief, confidence. These are all of the things that came after that successful interleukin 2 intervention. And so the question really I ask, if you were one of his either interns, residents, or researchers, well, what's going to, when your get up and go just got up and went because maybe you had another death, how do you get from the left-hand side to the right-hand side? And that's where I think a mentor plays a huge role, because research is going to bring the two extremes that are on this slide, on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side. Well, I thought, so that very question of how do you move from these failures, how do you move forward from these failures, was actually a question that he was asked. And this is how he responded. I thought it actually got me really thinking about something that I'll show you in the follow-up slides.
I recently saw a quote by Abraham Lincoln that said, success consists of moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm.
That's it. I think what I heard is research is war. He actually even said that earlier in the podcast. He basically, there was a time in one of our administrations, maybe in the 70s, where there was a war on cancer declared. And so, I don't think it's just cancer, though. I mean, I think research is a intense conflict between a problem and a solution, between a hypothesis and it's being properly tested and validated or refuted. Research is a war. It's a conflict. It's an intense conflict. It certainly, for the researcher, can feel every bit like you are in this incredible struggle. And so that's one part. I don't think we think about that research as a war. Research, however, also has a very creative side to it. And I think all of us can imagine that there is this creative opportunity to do the creation of new knowledge that doesn't exist. And how do we think about that? Well, that really reminded me, or thought of a book that I read many years ago. And the title of the book is this, The War of Art. And so you can see how I'm playing off of, in the title of this book, how I drew from this idea that research is war, and that research is also a creative pursuit, much like artistic expression is a creative pursuit. Well, what struck me about this book, and what strikes me about research, and what strikes me about art, is that's what the artist is faced with. That's what the researcher is faced with at the very beginning of the experiment. It's a blank canvas. And so research starts, and certainly, as you heard in this case, starts again and again and again. It starts always with this blank canvas. And this is this is really the crux of this book, The War of Art, because how do you go from a blank canvas to something that really is meaningful? And I think that's where the help of a mentor comes in, because getting started or restarted is simply hard. It's just hard. It's paralyzing. Somebody had described the war of art in this picture here. And so this is that book in a pictorial sense. And the key word in the book is at the bottom. And Stephen Pressfield, the author, describes it as resistance with a capital R. Getting that blank canvas to become something other than a blank canvas is trying to battle against resistance. We can all find so many different ways to get off track. And when things don't go right, it's easier to think of something else to do that may seem like we're being productive in doing research, but it's not really getting us any closer to the solution that we're really after. And so the battle of resistance is really what book is all about. Resistance with a capital R, as though it's a demon almost that needs to be defeated. And this again is where a mentor can come in, because trying to move through that is really something that I think one faces as they're doing research. So the book asks the question in a different way, but essentially this is the question: what's the difference between art as a hobby and art that's a serious business? And I mean, essentially the answer in the book is that the amateur, the hobbyist, plays for fun, but the professional plays for keeps. And so we need to learn to play like a professional. And well, if you're going to be a professional, it's really helpful to have a great coach, or essentially a mentor. And so that's where the mentor comes in to get us through and to help us defeat the resistance that's paralyzing us from moving forward. So there's the book, The War of Art. I'm not really big into self-help books, but I have to say this one definitely did give me a kick in the ass, just like Esquire quote there at the bottom of the book says. Consistency, though, this is the shortened version of the book. Consistency is the secret sauce of success. And so the point in the book is you just show up every day. You show up, you sit in the seat, and you do the work. And that's what the pro does. Shows up every day, stays at the job. And I put in my parenthetic comment, for a healthy amount of time, because we can certainly overdo that or underdo that. And so there's a healthy amount of time, but it is showing up every day. We're in it for the long haul. Steve Rosenberg was 81 when he currently, and when he did that interview. The stakes are high and real. I don't think you could see that any other way from Rosenberg's comments, but I think all of us feel the same about our own research. Um, we should not over identify with our work. And this is really something that I've struggled with my entire life because it is so important to us. We can take pride in it, but we shouldn't let it define us. We should keep it all in proper perspective. We should become master of the techniques and receive receive praise and accept blame. And so it's this idea, consistency is the secret sauce of success that defeats resistance every time. So this comes back to our quote that was mentioned by Steve Rosenberg. And when I started researching that quote, achieving success, I found that it was actually attributed to many other people besides Abe Lincoln. For example, it's widely been attributed to Winston Churchill. Same quote, success is the ability to go from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. And the reason I put this in my presentation today is it seems interesting to me that all of those who have dealt with war have found this quote to be tied to them, because it must be a key attribute of a mentor is somehow this ability to maintain enthusiasm even when the chips are down and they're down repeatedly. So this idea that we have to start and restart is really getting us to this idea of, well, we've failed. Maybe we've made a mistake somehow. I mean, in this podcast, Rosenberg said, we've killed people. That those are his quotes. And because we didn't understand what we were doing. And so clearly you would think to yourself, I've made a mistake, but let's take a look at this. So the goal of research, is acquiring new knowledge, but it's not learning from a classroom textbook or something organized. It's what I'd like to call learning in the wild. There isn't really a playbook. And so you're going to make mistakes. That's just an inevitable thing. And the problem is we really don't train our students or ourselves to be used to failure, but that's what it takes to be successful at research. If we take a different take on mistake, here's what we come up with. If you view the word mistake as a prefix, miss, and so you did a miss. I mean, it's you just didn't quite get it right, as opposed to associating that something that you botched as a failure. And so, now you can continue that and think of another prefix, retake, and it's just the same lesson, start and restart over and over again. We're going to fail, we need to rethink, and we need to restart. And I think this is really what the coach does with the viewing what's gone wrong and then thinking about ways to overcome that. With that background, I wanted to now take us to what was on the title of the slide, besides being a spark for lasting impact, or whatever I might have said on that. This is the preamble that I've slightly paraphrased it on that website that Patty mentioned, mentorfirst.org. And so I'd like you to think about this, because I don't think on first pass you can say, yes, this is all nice and good. But when you get to the fourth point, I think you might have a reaction to it that may or may not be in agreement with what's written here. But we're all expected, scientists, to produce output, research, high quality. It's accomplished not by us as faculty members, but by you as students and postdocs, or staff and research associates. That output, step number or point number 3, is linked to mentoring of the researchers. And the fourth point is prioritizing the needs of researchers and providing high quality mentorship leads to greater creativity and ultimate productivity. And so look at these 4 points and ask yourself if you are in agreement or disagreement, enthusiastic or unenthusiastic, or there's just not enough, maybe there's not enough information here. But I'd like you to go back to the Jamboard. We'll flip to page 2 at the top. You can flip over to page 2. And I'd like to know how you react to the statement, especially statement number 4, that is prioritizing the needs of researchers and providing high quality mentorship is what leads to greater productivity and quality, creativity and productivity. So this will take a few minutes. It's 12:26 and we'll go at least until 12:30 because I think this is where we want to have a discussion. And I'd like to get you to pause and think about this for a few moments. It's okay to disagree. It's also okay to just say there's a gap in the logic here. And it's also okay to say, well, it's an individual thing and it may be okay for some, but not others. Thank you, Patty, for expanding that. I think, or whoever did that, that's nice. This is a point about the empowering the individual to let their autonomy come through. And that part of it is super important because I think everyone who goes to graduate school or takes a postdoc position is certainly traveling down that pathway of greater and greater independence. The second point, though, if needs, is something like if the person has a problem with work-life balance, then maybe that's more of the lab culture. What's the culture in your group? Maybe it's a toxic culture. Maybe it's a culture that demoralizes people who are maybe not working as the number of hours. And so that may be a problem at the very top, I would say. We're starting to get a lot of comments. This is great. Patty, I'm going to ask you if you can pick out some and we can have a discussion about this. Do you mind being a moderator?
Oh, no problem. Thanks. I will. So one theme that's popping up a little bit here, Jeff, is to the extent that we think of research as standing on the shoulders of giants, then kind of by definition, mentoring the next generation is always going to be an important thing to do. But we also kind of have the idea that we're also human beings. So we want to, respect each other's humanity and dignity, and also make time for us to grow together in other ways. And so I think that there's also this, maybe this is like an American specific cultural idea of being a workaholic is the best kind of holic to be. That's the kind of what in many other cultures is considered dysfunctional is we tend to celebrate being a workaholic. And you raised that earlier point when you talked about a healthy amount of time devoted to work. But I think that's a real struggle for a lot of people is to not have all of your ego identified with how many hours you're putting in the lab. And it's easy to judge people on that kind of thing. It's like, I was there till midnight. What about you? Ugh. So
right. I put a circle around that yellow one there because I think that this is one of the reasons why Mentor First got started. And it's a recognition that what we're doing in training the researchers in our lab is about our research, yes, but it also has this much longer lasting value, which was in the title of my presentation. And so if you keep and are if you're mindful of that, that's an obligation that we all have, then I think it becomes compelling to say I want to be a mentor first, and the research will be great that follows if I really pay attention to that. And I will be leaving this lasting impact on people. And I will end my talk by trying to make that point hit home in a hopefully a very impactful way.
Yeah, I think that no matter what your area of research is, thinking about that your trainees and the people you're mentoring are going to be like the product of your research group, and that's going to change the world in various ways. I think that's a really healthy way to think about it, instead of just thinking about what publications and grants were the outcomes of this thing.
All right. The Jamboard is going to stay active. If people want to think about it and post, we'll definitely collect them and we can probably post them somewhere later on. I'm going to move forward because I'm going to now try to give you a little bit of my own story and sort of how I've changed my mindset over the years. And so this is so I'm going to leave the Jamboard going and move forward. I'm going to give a personal story of like how, for me, the journey of being a mentor has changed over the years. And certainly I would say I haven't always had the mindset of being a mentor first. In fact, from my earliest days of existence on this planet Earth, my mother would often tell me this idea that this is you, Jeff. You are in the center. You think. I mean, she said, you think you're in the center. The world revolves around you. Well, Jeff, my mom would say, the world does not revolve around you. And in spite of the fact that she told me that many times when I was growing up, I think I probably didn't lose that. I had this big me attitude. I'm the, reason my lab exists. That was, those are the pronouns that I was using, right? It was all about me. I've changed my mind a lot because now I look at, this thing, which is a stack of paper that has a list of publications that my name is on every one of them. And it's called, some might call this stack of paper my CV. Uh, I totally don't see it that way anymore. When I think about the list of publications that are on this and the success that's come from my own research group, and in fact, I just caught myself. I don't even like to call it my own group anymore. I like to call it the More Group because I really like to think that everybody in the group has a voice and ownership and is part of this thing called the More Group. Um, I like to choose my pronouns carefully. I slip up, as you heard me do it already, but it's really much more of a we effort. And I've been fortunate, Philippe, I know, is here to not only have researchers in the More group, but to participate with researchers in AMS and a great set of collaborators. And I think one of the most important things that we have done is to be mindful that we are a team and that we can achieve a lot more, because I will be the first to say that there's no way that my research, the research that I have been associated with, could have ever been as successful had it not been for both the people who have joined the More group, but also being a part of the AMS research group here at Beckman. And I will be the first to say that my research would have been a tiny slice of chemistry that probably nobody would have cared too much about. And I think that it has materialized into something that has so much more potential and excitement, largely because of the team effort and the praise goes to the team and certainly not the individual. And so I really don't even like to call this my CV anymore. I really like to think of this as a stack of paper. My name happens to be on the publications that are listed here, but those publications were the work of a lot of other people. The second thing is I thought to myself, well, if I had to go and hit the reset button, and it was 1990 again all over when I began as an assistant professor, how would I do things differently? There's another book, a book that I have not read, but I've heard described many times, called The Artist's Way, and some of you are probably familiar with it. And there's a practice that's described in The Artist's Way, again, that I've heard many people describe, and I've seen actually it play out in my own home, that is something I wish I had adopted. And The Artist's Way in this book is also about how to move that blank canvas into something that is really beautiful. Describes the idea of journaling first thing in the morning. Cameron is the author, and she describes this as morning pages. 3 pages, first thing you get up in the morning. And if I could do anything in a reset mode starting in 1990, I wish I had every morning gotten up and at least one of those 3 pages devoted it to the names of the people who are in the Moore group carrying out research. That would be such an intentional way to put my mind focused on those individuals. What are they thinking about right now? Is their research journey on a good path? Are they trying to, trudge through a trail that has almost no way to, no obvious way to go? I wish I had been more mindful and do something like journaling every day. What an amazing collection that would have been, looking back on it, if I had that set. And so I'm offering this as a suggestion. It's untested. I haven't done it myself. I've seen my wife do this, by the way. She's an avid journaler every morning, and I see how it impacts her. And I wish I had done it as a mentor to be more intentional about the people in the Moore group. You might ask yourself, well, I'm not a mentor really, but I actually disagree. I think everybody from the earliest ages develop mentoring. And so I would argue that we all have this opportunity to help the people around us. And that's really what mentoring is all about. So what can you do to be a mentor, a better mentor? Because that's really better is all we strive for. Nobody is going to be the best at it. It's something that we can all move toward. And this is where that website, Mentor First, comes in. It does have some very nice resources put together by Jen Heemstra, who's at Emory, Neil Garg, who's at UCLA. They got the ball rolling. And if you go to that website, well, first of all, I should say, oh, I skipped a page. The very landing page of that website has this picture. And when I saw it, Jen pointed me to the web page, and I saw this, and I thought, it's in our genes. What is she talking about? And then I heard our Beckman Brown lecture this year, which was given by Nicholas Christakis, and he spoke on the evolutionary origin of a good society. And he had this thing called the social suite, which the 8 points that are listed there were part of the social suite. And I don't know about you, but when I look at that list of 8 points, I absolutely see mentor-mentee relationships as being encompassed by that social suite. And so this idea that Jen put, it's in our genes, is actually supported in some way. Maybe that's a loose connection, but I think it's pretty real and pretty tight in this evolutionary origin of a good society that Nicholas Christakis spoke about. If you're looking for a place to read something, and it's going to take you all of 5 minutes or less, this article that Jen and Neil wrote to kick off their website is a little bit more compelling of beyond that preamble that they put on their page, and I would send you there. Next, I would love, Champaign-Urbana to light up on this map. If you are a postdoc, if you are a graduate student, and you really subscribe to this idea that we are here first and foremost as mentors, our research will follow, and it will be great if we're mentors. You can endorse the website. If you are a faculty member and you want to demonstrate a commitment, which includes, by the way, getting your research group involved. And again, they have a number of activities that you can do with your group to try to really become a better mentor through the experience of mentoring. Then I would encourage you to take the pledge, which I did, and I'm a supporter of this website. I'm going to conclude, and then I'm going to show you one last snippet from this interview, which I think speaks to this idea of lasting impact. But everybody struggles, and so we all need mentors. People who look up to you are going to struggle, and you have the opportunity to mentor. I think the three things that mentoring offers is, in the moment, peace of mind. Everybody wants to know that there's a safety net, someone there to support them, that they're not alone, and they're not in isolation. I think it's this idea that we can show up every day and face that blank canvas, and we can do that tomorrow. I think having a mentor there to, when you do get stuck, you have someone to go to, and I think that's really important. Building a lab culture that embodies mentoring throughout it, meaning that it's not just, the PI at the top, but a research group where there's wholehearted participation of mentoring of one another is really how that group develops a culture that's really a positive culture for everyone, and where I believe the lab flourishes. And finally, the final point is I believe that being a mentor provides those you mentor confidence that will grow throughout the lifetime. And so I'm just going to end this by another short, about a minute and a half clip that comes at the very end of this podcast. And the tables are turned. It's no longer Steve Rosenberg who speaks. So he speaks initially at the beginning, but he's going to turn it over to the host, Peter Attia, who was a resident under Steve Rosenberg. So listen up to and catch the body language and the sincerity of how this really made a lasting impact.
We spend a lot of time just learning how to help people. It's a unique opportunity in the world and in life in general. So,
I found I pulled this off the wall today. I wasn't sure if you still recognize these guys here. This is us from.
Sure,
I think this is 16 years ago. We both look
wow,
quite a bit younger, and this is the only picture of me in my office. Is this picture?
Wow.
And it speaks to what an influence you've been in my life. I think the list of people who have had a greater impact on the course of my life than you is somewhere between 0 and epsilon. It's a decidedly small list. So I feel forever in your debt. And though I have not been able to follow in your footsteps, your impact is greater than you could ever recognize.
All right, that's
we
it.
spend a
I wanted to end with that that lasting impact statement that came at the end. So I'm happy to have a conversation. We have a few minutes yet before the time, and Patty, if you want to moderate, that's great.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. First, let's virtual round of applause. Thank you, Jeff, for a very inspiring talk and bringing up so many great points in a different way to think about mentoring. I mean, we often hear about mentoring techniques like active listening and whatever, but really the intent is to think about things in this much broader way. So first, let me say, if you would like to ask a question, you should be able to unmute yourselves. Let me double check. Yes, I have allowed everybody, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask a question verbally, that's fine. If you'd like to put something in the chat, that's fine. Oh yes, Julian, you've raised your virtual hand, so you may go first.
Hey, hi Beth.
Hey.
Nice talk.
Thank you.
You talked about the artist's way in this resetting thing, and then you said something that I thought was curious, which is it was untested. And I was thinking of, are there things in your career, like can you identify things in your career that you have done that are, I guess, in your mind, tested and successful, that that have helped you move forward either early on in your career? Because I guess the dynamics of the mentoring, I mean, I'm thinking more of academic mentoring, but like the pressures early on are much different than later on, and what you can do early on versus what you can do later on are different. I don't know if you have some perspective into that, or I guess I'm just rambling at this point.
No, I do. Julian, I think, so you raise a bunch of great points. During the first 5 years, while you're trying to establish a lab and a research program, it is absolutely a pressure cooker. There's no doubt for the PI. And I think, Jen and Neil both address this, and I'll tell you my personal story in a second, but I definitely think this is an issue. I mean, we have some people here who are leaders on our campus. I mean, Philippe for sure, and others, that really, we can begin to think about, are we really setting the system up for promoting this idea of mentoring first by putting such a high stakes at the very beginning? And it's a point that obviously we're not going to solve right now. But I will tell you my personal story. I mean, my attitude always was in the very beginning, like, well, I got to get through this period, and I've got to make. I can't do anything beyond that first 5 years if I'm not going to have a job in an academic as an academic position. So, there was no doubt that was first and foremost on my mind, and I was over. So here's my mistakes from early on. Way too hands-on, way too much making the decisions for what was going on in the research group. And so here's the personal story. In 1996, Leanne, my wife, has a brain aneurysm. And for the next, this is August, oh no, this is July of 1996. I had 2 small kids at the time. And, I had just been promoted a couple of years earlier. So I was at least had that safety net in place. If I was an assistant professor, I don't know, how I would have dealt with it. But it did take me out of the lab for a considerable period of time. She was in Chicago, and I was there with her and with my kids for probably the month of July, from July 13th through the end of August, roughly. That was a long time. That was the first time I had ever been away from the lab and not had that sort of dropping in, seeing what people were doing. Obviously much different than it is now, right, Julian? But, I was suddenly not, I mean, the communication tools in 1996 were the telephone, right? I mean, maybe we had email, but it wasn't widely used. So it was running the research group with an occasional phone call. And it was pretty occasional, to be honest with you, because I had a lot of other things on my mind that wasn't really at the forefront of research, wasn't at the forefront at that point. And, I had really, when I did think about the research, I was like, oh, it's not going to be good when I get back. Much to my surprise, the group just like totally rallied. And what I realized at that point when I came back and things were going well, better than they probably for sure would have if I had been there, is this idea of when people are empowered, they rise to the occasion. They are free from this very demanding, sort of stressful, this is the way I have to do things, this is what has to be done. And that's what it took for me to learn that lesson of don't be so there's if you have a lab of 10 or 15 or 20 other people, there are 10 or 15 or 20 other brains that will contribute to the problem in creative ways if you give them the opportunity to. And that's a lot more powerful than the brain of one, especially one if it's pretty small like mine is. To really make a lot of progress in ways that I hadn't thought about. And I learned a lot from that lesson. And fortunately, I had mentors who I had seen that mode of operation. Bob Grubb's one of them, in operation. And I thought, well, it's just because Bob has Caltech students. It's not true. I mean, Illinois students will stand up to Caltech students and postdocs, and I think you can say the same thing about MIT. We have students who can absolutely be more provided. I mean, I don't think that was sustainable forever, right? I couldn't have been gone forever, but come back and have a different attitude about how to run the research group, how to empower people, how to be a little less hands-off, and how to take more of a team approach to growing the research group. It's a risky opportunity to do that right from the very get-go when you're an assistant professor and the door opens day one and you suddenly walk into truly a blank slate and try to get things going. But I've rambled equally long or longer, a long answer to your short question, but a personal story of mine, which an event that at the time was the most horrible thing, but maybe I learned the best lesson from it. And fortunately, of course, as everybody knows, Leanne recovered. And so I'm, grateful for that.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Julian
Jeff.
and Jeff. Let's go over to Philippe.
Thanks. Thanks, Jeff. I really enjoyed the presentation. I could not agree more than the foundation of good mentoring is first to figure out what is the strength of the person that you work with, that you're lucky enough to work with. I agree that at the very beginning, I would feel the same way. At the beginning of my career, I would focus much more on the technical part of the work that we're doing and less on trying to figure out exactly what they were very good at. But one thing I may want to add to your very nice presentation is the immense satisfaction that you have when you realize that the mentoring you've done with one of your student or one of your postdoc has worked very well, right? And I always say the best example is when the student takes the project in directions that you never anticipated, right? And then they just run with it. And you realize to say, holy moly, this is exactly that. There's no more satisfying moment, I would say, as an academic advisor than that time. And as I said, I think mentoring is very important. It's sometimes hard, right? It's hard to find exactly the right way of doing this, but it brings tremendous satisfaction, and that's critical.
I think we've shared some of those examples that you described where you do see this amazing success that you hadn't imagined. It's really one of the best parts of the job.
No doubt about it. Absolutely.
We've got something in the chat from Aditi. Oops, I can't. So yeah, Aditi asks about kind of a two-way street question. So we tend to think about the mentor as being more knowledgeable and experienced and therefore helping the mentee develop. But would you say that you'd want to have a sort of a more two-way conversation about this and think of yourself as co-mentoring, that you could learn from your students and postdocs as well?
Oh, this is an excellent point. If, you asked me this, I don't know, maybe even 5 years ago, I would have said, I don't know that I'll learn to be a better mentor from my students. But if you go to Mentor First, they make a pretty strong case that there is this partnership. And in fact, there's an accountability statement that they ask for, where the research group provides feedback on how am I doing as a mentor. and can I get better at it? And so, I'm learning still, and I'm learning from, people like Jen and Neil, that, there are really interesting ways to think about growing your ability to be a mentor through that feedback that can come. And when you get that feedback, you understand not only where your deficiencies are, where you're not communicating well, maybe, but you also, it opens you up to realize that there's something that you need to pay attention to more than you might be otherwise.
Thank you, Jeff. I think that the other kind of thing that comes out here is, on the one hand, as you and Philippe both alluded to, and early in your career, it's sort of about individual excellence and meeting those goals for promotion and tenure and that kind of thing. But it seems like once you've got there, once you've established a level of competency and reputation, then in a sense, then you can sort of relax a little bit and then grow and think about mentoring in these new ways. Maybe that's, I don't know if that's has to be how every system works, but it seems very common that even in organizational life, there's theories about how the organization has to first evolve to a level of competency that it is accomplishing things, and then it can expand and think about how can we work together with it, again, with a noble cause together that we're working towards. So I think that, so in some senses, mentoring might be to helping people develop individual competencies. Like, I don't know how to do this lab technique, so I better learn that. Okay. But then once you establish those kinds of skills, then kind of really being able to do synthesis and engagement in a broader way seems to be then a good next step. So there is, I think, an interplay between individual competence and collaborative excellence.
Right.
So you can't just know nothing and be like, I want to just be a nice person kind of thing, right?
Right. And again, on this idea of the individual needs are very much brought out in the article that Jen and Neil wrote, and that there's no one size fits all when it comes to mentoring, and you really do have to customize how you interact with people. And that's why, if I were to journal about people, it would be a different entry for every individual. And so I definitely think that there's this learning to customize how you deal with what are the problems, what's at hand, what's at the top, for the different individuals, is something that we have to learn to get better at.
All right, well, we're just about out of time. So again, thank you very much, Jeff. Virtual round of applause to Jeff. And thanks to the audience here for being with us today. This has been recorded, and so we'll eventually be able to post this somewhere. So thanks very much, everybody. And that's now we have time for a 2-minute break before our next 1 o'clock meetings.
Thank you, Patty, for hosting this.
Thank you.